Hello, my name is Latrea. I am the mother of an 18-year-old, as well as I have a husband. My home life was very different, I would say. And the odd part about this is because as a child, a young child, you never really know what's going on, but you can tell there's something different. Okay, you might not be able to put your finger on it, but as you grow up and as you look at other children in other households and you compare them to yours, you're always like, okay, wait a minute, there's something not quite right about here. But as a child, you don't have any choice but to, kind of go with the flow, I guess. Even though you might know that there's something not quite right here. My mom was addicted to drugs. Now, I want to say she was addicted to drugs before I was born, but she wasn't as bad until after I was born. And, when you become an adult yourself, you can kind of you kind of look at your parents as adults, not just as your mom. Because when my mom became a drug addict, or a heavy drug addict, if you will, she was dealing with having a disabled child. But at the same token, I can also empathize and understand that here you have a child that was born with a rare disability that nobody knew nothing about, okay? You're taking this child back and forth to the doctor day in, day out, day in, day out, and you're the only one doing it. So, you don't have any type of support system to lean on or to help you. But again, I'm not saying that that's a reason for someone to actively use drugs, but if something like that were to happen, you can kind of, sort of, maybe understand just a little bit. I have a disability called Pfeiffer Syndrome. This syndrome came about in 1975, I want to say. It's a chromosomal disability where I think you're either lacking a chromosome or you have too many chromosomes. I don't really know, the specifics of it. But at any rate, with this particular disability, the bones in your body don't fuse the way they're supposed to fuse. That's what creates our joints. That's what creates our structure of our arms or our legs. And the same goes for in your skull. So in my case, my bones did not fuse properly. There were some areas in my skull where I didn't have bones, and my brain was exposed. And then on top of that, we have stems that go all the way around your skull. And these stems protect the skull from sitting on top of the brain. Well, when I was born, I didn't have any stems. I have had over 35, 45 operations. The first operation I had, I was 2 months old. I had to have what is right here is called a trach, because I couldn't breathe I couldn't breathe. So I had to have something, I had to have a tube in my neck to help me breathe. There have been times when I was rolled into the operating room at 10 o'clock in the morning and did not come out of the operating room until 2 o'clock the following morning. I had lost so much blood that they didn't think that I was going to make it. I've had bones taken from different parts of my body to rebuild me a skull. But imagine going through that as a mother by yourself. And I think for my mother, I think she was chasing that feeling. She enjoyed that feeling of escaping responsibility just for a little while. My mom was getting money for us every month. My mother would never purchase the food. My mother would sell the food stamps for money to buy drugs. You walk in the house and you open your refrigerator and there's nothing there. My mother sold everything she could possibly sell. I remember, I'm about to tell my age, when VCRs first came out, and everybody wanted a VCR. So I remember my mom got us a VCR. And I was so excited. Like, I had all these Disney movies I wanted to watch. So I told myself, I'm going to school today. When I come home from school, I'm going to fix me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some chocolate milk. And I'm going to watch Cinderella. I get home and I walk through the door and there's no VCR on the TV. There was a VCR sitting on that TV when I left for school this morning. Where is the VCR? Me being who I am, I walk out the house, turn back around, walk back in. Maybe maybe I'm seeing stuff, or maybe. So I look, and the VCR is still not there. And so I go and I find my mom, and I ask my mom, what happened to the VCR? And she gives me the same reason she always gives me. None of your business. I automatically know what happened to the VCR. She sold the VCR. I went to school with sometimes dirty clothes because my mom didn't wash the clothes. As time went on, it got worse and worse and worse. It got to a point where she moved the drug. She put my dad out, and she moved the drug dealers inside the house. And then I remember, I think I was 10 or 11. And by this time, my sister was born. And we got put out. I came home from school, and there was an eviction notice on the door due to lack of payment of rent. And they put our stuff on the street, on the curb. So I'm 9, 10 years old, getting off the bus with my friend. And I'm walking by, and I'm seeing all of my toys, all of my furniture, all of my things on the street. We had to leave because we didn't have anywhere to go. We walked the streets for 3 days because we had nowhere to go. And I remember my sister telling me she was tired. I mean, she was only 2, so what do you expect? I had to pick her up and put her on my back. I went from one shelter to another. And back then, you could only stay in those shelters for a limited amount of time. It didn't matter whether you had kids or not, but you can only stay in there for a limited amount of time. So we ended up going into this program with the Department of Social Services, and they put us into what's called a transitional shelter. Now, in a transitional shelter, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to transition you from the shelter to your own place. That's the whole idea. You're supposed to be working, while you're in the shelter, you're supposed to be working toward getting your own place, getting stable, getting on your feet. Well, that's difficult to do if you're still on drugs. And the thing about it, even while we were in the shelter, my mom was still abusing drugs. At this point, I knew. You know what I'm saying? Like, I knew what it was. I knew what was going on. And I felt like it was my responsibility to hold it all together. I couldn't tell anybody. You know, when I go to school, you can't tell anybody your mom's on drugs. You can't tell anybody what's going on. Because if you do, they're going to take you away. We stayed in that shelter for about a year. And then finally, from that shelter, we transitioned to our own place. Again, she's still on drugs. And I think this is when it becomes the worst of the worst. We move into an apartment. And again, she moves more drug addicts, more drug dealers in with us. So when I tell you we had people sleeping on the floor, we had people sleeping everywhere. And I would have to get up every day and go to school like nothing was going on, like nothing was happening. I had to get up and go to school up until like it was all good. When I came home, I didn't know if I was going to have dinner. I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from. But I had to get up and go to school and put a smile on my face and be a happy-go-lucky kid like it was all good. And I think that was like the toughest, well, one of the toughest times in my life. Because so many times I wanted to tell somebody what was going on. So many times I wanted to scream out, I need help. I need somebody to come and help me. And my mom always has this whole saying, what goes on in my house stays in my house. And I tell parents now, don't tell your children that, because what you're missing is, okay, what goes on in your house stays in your house. Abuse stays in your house. Neglect stays in your house. Battered stays in your house. Sexual abuse stays in your house. All of that stays in the house because you're not allowed to talk about it and express it and say what's going on. I find now today that's why so many of us have different mental health stuff going on, because we were made to suppress so much of our childhood. And you're programmed to believe that. You're programmed to believe, oh no, I'm not supposed to tell you what's going on in my house. Oh no, you might be able to help me, but my mama said I can't tell you what's going on in my house. It starts as a kid and you become programmed. And when you become an adult, you do the same thing. Fast forward to 6th grade. 6th grade was a turning point for me because for a number of reasons. I remember we were going on the first overnight trip that we ever took. We take it as this is 6th grade, and we go to this camp. It's called Camp Schmidt, and you go overnight. So I remember coming home, bringing my mother the permission slip. Now they had already paid for it for me to go. All she had to do was sign the permission slip and make sure that I had some clean clothes to take with me. That's all she had to do. So I remember putting the permission slip on the refrigerator. And every day I came home, Mom, you gotta sign my permission slip. Mom, you gotta sign my permission slip. Mom, you gotta sign my permission slip. So finally, about a day before it was due, she signed it. Now it's the whole clean clothes thing. Because my mother didn't wash clothes. She never had any money to wash clothes. So you were not going to tell me that I was not going on this trip. You hear me? I put my clothes in the bathtub. And I called myself washing my clothes in the bathtub. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, yeah, I'm going to wash my own clothes. I'm going to take them outside. I'm going to hang them on the patio. By the time the morning hit, they're going to be dry. I can put them in the suitcase and off the camp I'm going to go. Yeah, I didn't have it that way. The next morning I got up. They were just as wet as they were when I put them out there. But no, I wasn't going to let that stop me, though. I was not going to let that stop me. I put the wet clothes in a bag, and I was determined I was going to camp. So I went to school, and if you know anything about wet clothes that are compacted in a bag, they start to smell. And then they have like this, and then they're heavy also because they're wet. So my teacher picked up my bag, and she was like, did you put your whole kitchen sink in this bag? I was like, no, it's just my clothes. And then she was like, well, why do they smell like that? I said, oh, I washed them. She was like, what do you mean you washed them? I put them in the bathtub and I washed them. And then I hung them outside to dry. She opened the bag and there were nothing but, when I say soaking wet clothes, soaking wet clothes. They took a field trip to the laundromat, washed my clothes, dried my clothes, folded them up and put them in the bag for me to take. That's why I say that was a turning point. But the crazy thing about this is that I thought I was keeping this big secret, and I wasn't. They knew. That's why they always did extra stuff for me. That's why I always got extra lunch. That's why I got, extra snack. Or, when money was required, the teachers would pitch in and do it for me. Because they knew that she was on drugs. I remember one time when Santa's Secret Shop came. And everybody had money to go to Santa's Secret Shop but me. And they put together a grant to give me money to go to Santa's Secret Shop because I didn't have the money to go. My teacher would always give me her daughter's clothes because my mom never bought me clothes. I'm not going to say she didn't have money to buy me clothes because that wouldn't be true. She had money, she just chose to use the money in different places. So fast forward a little bit, I think I started to get a little out of hand in school. And they called Child Protective Services. Before Child Protective Services came out to the house, my house was raided. I had one of my cousins who was heavy into drugs, was running from the cop. And he ran from the top of the complex to the bottom of the complex where I lived. And he ran into my home. And the police was chasing him. And the police came to the door and bang, 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 bang on the door. And he came and he wanted to check my mom's apartment for my cousin. And my mom wouldn't let him come in because she was like, well, you don't have a warrant, so you can't come in. But what they didn't know was they had been watching the apartment the whole time. They had been watching the influx of traffic. They had been watching the time of the night that people were moving. They had been doing surveillance for about 4 or 5 months on her apartment. And one day, I remember them kicking the door in. And I think me and my sister, we went to hid in the closet. And I can't remember if they found anything. I know my mother put the gun behind the toilet. I don't remember if they found anything or anything like that. But I do know that after that happened, she got an eviction notice. And right around the time she got the eviction notice, we also got taken away and put into foster care. Originally, we were not supposed to go into foster care. Originally, we were supposed to go with one of my friend's mom. She was supposed to take care of us until my mom she ended up getting sick and was unable to do it. So we ended up having to go to foster care. You know what? I don't even have the words to describe foster care. I wouldn't wish that experience on my worst enemy. I don't have the words to describe it. I mean, you go to these homes with people that claim to care but don't really care. And what it is like when you have a child that has a disability, you get more money for children that have disabilities versus children that don't. And so when they find out I have a disability and they're going to get more money, of course, they'll take me. One of the most horrific foster care homes I was in this foster home. And I had never encountered this in my life. But this woman, a grown woman, mind you, could not stand to look at me. She made me stay in the back room because I didn't look like everyone else. So when I came home from school, I had to go in the bedroom. I wasn't allowed to sit in the living room and watch TV. I wasn't allowed to use dishes or regular cups and spoons and bowls. I had to use plastic stuff that could be thrown away because she was afraid that whatever I had would transpose onto their object and they would get it. I remember one time they were going to the mall, and me and my sister went with them. We had to go with them because they couldn't leave us in the house by ourselves. And in the car. And I think we sat in that car 9 hours because they didn't want to take me in the store with them. Now, at this point, take my sister. I don't care if you don't take me. I don't care. I'm fine with sitting there. But take my sister. They didn't have to leave her there. I understood why they didn't take me. I mean, not to say that that was right or wrong, but I understood. It was hot outside. It was hot in the car. It was like you just couldn't get no air. I felt like I was suffocating. And I was sitting there through no fault of my own. I was sitting there because this is the way God chose to create me. I was sitting there because that's it. I mean, that's the reason I was sitting there. Because this is how I look. And it's not like I had anything to do with that. It's not like I had any type of hand in that. And so what I've learned is, well, in that point in my life, my messages, through my experiences, I received messages. And in that experience, the message I received was I wasn't worthy. I wasn't worthy of love. I wasn't worthy of anything. I should just be thrown away. Like the paper cups and the paper plates I ate off of. I'm just worthy to be thrown away. That was a message that resonated with me throughout my extended foster care. All because I had a disability. I was treated horribly. In one foster home, I remember I was not allowed to bathe, but one time a week. Every other time I had to go downstairs in the bathroom downstairs to take fur baths. So I would go to school smelling because I hadn't been in the bathtub. And, I wasn't allowed to bathe. And to this day, I still don't know why I was only allowed to bathe one time a week. But their form of punishment was to stand us in the corner. Like, we just have to stand there. And sometimes you'll be standing there so long, you forget why you're standing there. I mean, you can feel your legs start to crick. You can feel the numbness sink into your knees. And, and it's like, I don't know how much longer my legs can hold me up. That's just how long I've been standing there. Like if you did something, if you were disobedient or you lied or whatever the case might be, it was something infantile, I will say that. And you have to stand there and it will allow you to stand there until 12 at night. And you'll be so ready to go to bed. You'll be so ready to get into bed because your legs are on fire, like literally on fire from standing in one place that long. And I remember one night I was standing there and I remember I prayed. And I asked God, I was like, God, I can't do this anymore. I can't. My body can't. I can't do this anymore. And it's clear as I'm talking to you. He said, hold on. I got you. Now, at the moment, that's not what it felt like. But as time went on, I had to trust that he had me. Even though it didn't feel like it. Even though everything was falling down around me. It didn't feel like it. But he said he had me. So I had to trust that he had me. There were so many days where I walked my sister to the babysitter and I just felt like just walking past the house and running away. Just leaving. And like I said, it goes back to my messages and my experiences. It made me feel unworthy. It made me feel ugly. It made me feel like, I didn't even know why I was here, why I was created, why I was existing. As a teen, I tried to commit suicide several times because I just didn't understand. I remember being in ninth grade and I was in English class. I was just sitting in a chair and a young lady turned around and she looked at me. She said, I mean no harm. Now, that should have gave me away right there. But somebody says, I mean no harm. Typically speaking, there's going to be some harm that's going to follow. She said, I mean no harm. But if I had a child that looked like you, I would throw it in the trash can. And I'm like, I sat there for a second trying to understand how do you say that with a straight face to somebody. And that comment stayed with me well into my 30s. I can say that comment governed how I lived my life. That comment governed my relationships. That comment governed so much of my life until about 36. I finally found a way to break free from it. Because when I say it had me, it had me. But it wasn't until I really got into my spirituality and the Bible and the Word of God and what the Word of God said about me. And the Word of God says that I am beautifully, wonderfully made in His image. And it doesn't matter what man says. All that matters is what God says. And I am exactly who He wants me to be. I'm exactly what He wants me to be. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks. And like I said, it took me a minute to lock hold of that. But once I locked hold of it, and got it in here. That has been governing my life for the last 15, 20 years. But I say all of that to say, if I could leave one thing with someone that's watching this interview, you get to the other side. It might take a minute, might take a while, might take what seems like forever, but you get to the other side. If you don't give up and you don't fake, you get to the other side. You get to the other side of redemption. But you gotta keep pushing. You got to push when you don't want to. You got to push when it's hard. You got to push when you don't feel like it. You got to push even when you feel like you're pushing against everybody else. You got to push. Because that's the only way you're going to get to the other side of redemption. And when you feel weak and you feel like you can't do it anymore, you use that pain. You use that pain as your fuel. You use that pain because if it was not for the pain, if it was not for the circumstances, if it was not for the foster home, if it was not for the drug addicted parents, I would not be a 7-time published author. I would not have a master's degree. I would not have a bachelor's degree. So people often ask me, if you had to do it all over again, would you? In a heartbeat. I am a mom. I have an 18-year-old daughter. About 15, 20 years ago, I reconnected with my biological mom. We have a different relationship. I mean, I forgive her. I don't hate her. I don't have any malice towards her. But we don't have a mother-daughter relationship. I went on to get married. I had her. We remained married for 15 years. 15 very long years. And it's crazy because when I married him, I knew I didn't love him the way that you're supposed to love your husband. And I thought, okay, well, over time, I'll just grow into it. But I never grew into it. So I just decided when I turned 40, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And that's where my book came from. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not living my life the way that everybody thinks I should. I'm not conforming to what people think I should conform to. I'm going to start being authentic to the person that matters the most, me.